Now, if you're complaining about high petrol prices already, I'm afraid you might want to sit down and brace yourselves. The Central Energy Fund says the price of fuel could go above 27 Rand per litre next month. That's if the Rand continues to weaken against the US dollar and the crude oil price continues to increase. So let's find out what the chances are of this happening. Dick Forslund from the Alternative Information and Development Centre. Dick, hello, good to have you on eNCA. Let's talk about the oil price for a second if we could, though. I see it inching lower off the back of last week, just over $113 a barrel. Quite a slump. So I would have thought this is good news, but it might not be good news. Good morning.
Well, it depends how you see it. They speak now. I mean, there's different issues involved here. There's one, you have the fuel price in detail, so to speak, and the different levies and how the complicated way that this is regulated. Then you have the public finances. And then you have the very broad issue of climate change, which was illustrated by the floods in KZN and maybe also by the drought now in Nelson Mandela Bay. So all these issues comes together into one, you can say.
So could we get to 27 Rand a litre next month? Could we get to 27 Rand a litre? Do you think it's probable?
Well, I'm not an expert in following the oil price, but the war in Ukraine is continuing, and some observers say it can continue for years. So that is one main reason for the high price on crude oil. But I mean, the observers also speak about almost like a kind of bonanza when it comes to finding new oil resources and so on. And if the market is eventually flooded with crude oil in that way, well, then maybe it's good for the fuel price, but it's bad for the climate. So it's really, it's a very tricky issue, how to balance this. And then you have the public finances and people speaking about sort of taking away or reducing the general fuel tax or the general fuel levy. But then you have to increase other taxes, and you have to those who speak about sort of taking away the fuel tax or reducing it or keeping the rebate, which presently is 75 cents. They don't want to speak about other taxes, and I'm thinking specifically about increasing the progressivity of the personal income tax for high income earners. So you have to take all these factors into account.
And if government was looking to you for guidance this morning, Dick Forslund, what would you tell government to do? Of all the issues you've raised, we have to pick one solution over another. What solution and what alternative would you select?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is how we are dealing with this personally, but to make this general. As for me, I try to reduce the speed when I'm driving. Now, this is not an option, of course. If you are driving a truck, you can't sort of individually reduce your speed, and then the other transport companies are driving as usual. So I think one issue that is traversing all these three issues of climate change, public finances, and the fuel price, that is the speed limits in South Africa. And that would sort of really release the pressure also on the public sector. We have over 14,000 deaths in traffic in South Africa. Per year, reduce the speed limits to 110, 90, 70, and 50, which is in many other countries. And you would reduce the consumption of petrol, you will reduce the death in traffic, and you would also sort of reduce the pollution of the fossil fuel emissions, and it would do a little contribution to mitigate the climate crisis. So that is kind of like one thing I think should be up on the table, and to sort of embrace many trees with one hug. And so I think a reduction of the speed limits in South Africa, that is one kind of general reform that should be. But otherwise, I'm only thinking about the public finances and progressive taxation. That's what I would sort of promote.
So progressive taxation and public finances could be the way to look at this. We need a much deeper dig into this.
You can't only speak about the fuel taxes. You have to speak about the whole revenue of the government, and you have to speak about sort of the general, because it's the road accident fund is about 220 of the fuel price now, and the reason why the road accident fund levy is so high is because of the many deaths in traffic and injuries in traffic in South Africa.
And that's exactly to your point earlier, where you were talking about the speed decreases, that we could see a big change in behaviour. Dick, I really appreciate your time in joining us this morning. Dick Forslund, Alternative Information and Development Centre Senior Economist there. It's all to do with the money, but if you take money away from the fuel levy, where else does government get that money from? It's not as simple as just reduce the fuel levy. Those taxes are used elsewhere, albeit sometimes not appropriately, but that money does need to come from somewhere.